After our panelist presentation, we have navigated through the intricate landscape of patenting biotechnology and pharmaceutical invention. It has become evident that the journey is full with jurisdiction-specific complexities, rigorous enablement requirements, and a dynamic regulatory interface. The influence of artificial intelligence on invention adds yet another layer of sophistication, pushing the boundary of what is possible. Our exploration of the intellectual property rights set up in the pharmaceutical market, coupled with the examination of relevant court cases, underscore the critical importance of a well-rounded and informed approach to patenting. In closing, it's essential to recognize that while the road to secure patent in the biotech and pharmaceutical sector is undoubtedly challenging, but it's also immensely rewarding. The protection of intellectual property not yet safeguards the innovation of today, but also pave the way for the breakthrough of tomorrow. By staying abreast of the evolving legal landscape, embracing technology advancement, and fostering a culture of collaboration, we can continue to propel the field forward. Now we open to the audience. If there's any interesting topic to be addressed in today's panel, we welcome you to raise your questions.
Any questions?
I have a question. I don't know how relevant it is. For example, there is involvement of AI in a pharma-based invention. Any AI is seen as a black box, right? It's what happens inside is not here. So how do we define that in a claim? Should that be substantiated with wet lab data? We should reverse it and define a claim, or is it acceptable to say that it's done by AI? How do we draft the claim, and how do we bring that subject matter in a claim?
So I would like to share an interesting case where it was a drug which was, drug discovery, but AI driven. So you had a software through a computational methodology. They identified a drug, and it is a fictitious drug. At least in the specification, there was no data to show that this was indeed a drug molecule. But of course, there was data to support that this drug is going to act in this manner. So prospectively, the functionality test, we could expect that this drug molecule is going to have this binding pattern and could achieve this effect. But there was no enabling data to show that the drug has indeed been created, I can say, in wet lab conditions. So how the Indian examiner actually scrutinized this particular application was, he said that, okay, can you at least show me, from a computational model, whether this drug will indeed function as it intends to function, and if yes, I think, so in such instances, I think the test, the eligibility test would be actually the utility test, whether this drug, although it has been designed through an AI model or through a software, or whether this drug is finally going to work as it's supposed to work, and whether it's going to function as it is supposed to function, and if there is credible evidence to that fact, I think we have a fair chance to argue on the enablement standards. But yeah, it's still an even odds situation we are facing as far as
that. I just want to add a question. For example, if you have to have some additional data, can the description be amended at a later stage to bring in that subject matter, or that is not allowed? It's a general question that we require.
Yes, see, as far as adding data is concerned, India is quite rigid in that sense and conservative. You will not be able to supplement data after the application has been filed. To that extent, the enablement standards are quite rigid, at least from an Indian perspective. But what one could perhaps do is, identify it as supplementary data through an as an evidence or through an affidavit. You supplement it at the prosecution stage to evidence that yes, this drug indeed behaves or functions. So it is supportive evidence, but definitely cannot be, included in the specification at any point.
Thank you.
So I want to add what Divya has already said. And she has correctly said that for AI, what you are asking is that with the use of AI, the requirement of patentability will not change. The requirement will remain the same. The only way by which we can help ourselves is to generate more data, quicker data, because the AI can be used for the discovery of the lead compound. We can use AI for QA and QC processes. So that in that ways we can have more data. So what you were saying, that additional of the summation of data later on, that you can avoid if you use AI at the first step itself. So while doing this drug discovery process, if you use AI, you can generate more data and you can put all the relevant data in the specification itself at the time of filing. Because see, the purpose of AI is to get faster data. So that particular time we can utilize to generate other R&D projects. So that way you can use AI to have more data. But of course the patentability requirement will remain same until there is a change in the law.
Any more questions? So, is there any issues or comments panelists would like to share?
I'll just follow up with your question. If your question was also in the U.S., how much of the AI model system data do you need to include in a patent application in order to be able to meet the written description and enablement guidelines? We don't know is the answer right now, because trying to describe the model and the training and all of that in a patent application is complex. It's difficult to do. And what I'll say is, if you look at the rise of all sorts of different technologies, at the beginning, you need a lot of information, because the patent office doesn't believe that one of ordinary skill knows how to do this, and so you haven't enabled it, you don't have written description for it, because somebody reading your application wouldn't know how to do it. But as the technology progresses and as the industry is, and one of ordinary skill is more used to doing these, you need less and less. So we don't know yet. I'm sure those court cases are coming, but we don't know how much to put in yet.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Just a couple of remarks coming back what Michael was saying about the US experience of patenting. So with the Russian Federation as an industry, we were making the projects. I recall back in 2014, the project was titled Vision. So what we did, we analyzed the best international practices, and then we created roadmaps how to bring the Russian Federation as a state to those bright future. And in terms of IP, the US, the European Union, also Israel, Ireland, were always the best benchmarks. For example, yes, in terms of patenting, in terms of patent linkage, etc. And now, after a decade, really the situation is changing, and we very closely monitoring all the discussion with the Biden administration and in Brussels, what's happening with IP. And unfortunately, now the US and the European Union are not that much good really experiencing, because the IPR is weakened in the US, as Michael was saying, to a certain extent. And now China, for example, China now is one of the best examples worldwide. Because what they did in the pharmaceutical industry during the last 3 or 4 years, they really made a reform in the pharmaceutical and the healthcare sector, and they did it really fast. So again, they looked at the US experience, and they, for example, saw that in a certain year, maybe 2018, why worldwide it was, 20 new INNs launched, and in China only 3 of them. And then they analyzed what are the legal hurdles of that. And they really, during 3 or 4 years, they changed the entire system of pharmaceutical sector regulation. And now China is the best example, unfortunately not the US and not the EU. And in the US, we have the HRA Association, which is #1 lobbyist in the world in terms of how money they spend on lobbying, as Michael was saying. And they from time to time they do door-knock activities towards the Biden administration, now Trump administration. So we will see how the Trump administration behaves towards the pharmaceutical industry. We will see. We don't know. It really has effects on Russia as well, because pharmaceutical companies work in Russia. They are more of them US based. So we will see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vadim. Is there any questions, comments the audience would like to ask our panelists? Okay, if there's no questions from the audience, our panelists would like to give few take-home message from each of you to our audience.
Just one. I just thought I'll add a couple of points on enablement requirements from an India perspective. We just missed to cover that. But of course, the requirements are quite complex. Of course, globally the requirements are complex. But I think when we are looking at a holistic picture, there's definitely no one-size-fits-all policy. But it is important to take into consideration that if you're looking to nationalize your invention in various countries, also look at the standards in complex jurisdictions like India, where you do have to take a multi-pronged approach, because the enablement requirements are quite high, and especially where you are looking to protect a new chemical entity through a mark push claim, have sufficient data to support numerable representative examples. Also look at the options where you are going to integrate your enablement requirements along with your patent eligibility standards as well. So you ensure that your description has sufficient, say, comparative data, for instance, to address the Section 3D objection, or also look at the NBA requirements, which is again becoming a norm these days, the national biodiversity related regulations, where if you're using a resource, a natural biological resource from India, you will have to meet the standards of disclosing the source and origin of that material. And so we really have to take a holistic approach and look at it from the standpoint of multinational protection. Then these small these aspects become extremely crucial, at least for enablement requirements, because a deficiency as far as your specification is concerned, that cannot be remedied at a later stage, at least not in India. So it becomes very important. What do you want to add?
No, just that what Divya has very correctly said, that especially when we are talking of enablement requirement in pharmaceutical inventions, we always tend to cover a mark push structure which contains thousands of compounds, and at times it is very difficult to and practically impossible to enable each and every compound. So this is one thing which I think that the examining authorities should also understand, and there has to be some leniency towards the enablement requirement, specifically in cases of pharmaceutical. So as the guidelines of Innovation Office says, that we have to give a best representative examples of each embodiment. So if we are able to provide that, I think that should be enough, and especially for the pharma and mark push. I think Suman can add something on the biotech.
From the biotech perspective, when it comes to, let's say, any molecule which is binding to a particular receptor, Indian controllers are very strict on requirement of the sequence of that particular protein. So it is very much essential that functional claims are not allowed by Indian controller. So if it is like a particular polypeptide or a protein which is binding to a particular receptor and having specific activity, it will not be accepted unless and until you specify the sequence ID of that particular peptide. Or in fact, if there are multiple peptides, then the consensus sequence, or basically the other sequence of the catalytic domain, which is actually binding to that receptor. In the sense, one structural aspects needs to be essentially provided in the claim, which can be directly related to its functional part, so that, and a specific example needs to be there, so that it substantiates its patent eligibility, enablement requirement, as well as written description.
From Russia?
Well, I think that we all understand that IPR is in the pharmaceutical industry is of utmost importance, and that's what we're doing. And also artificial intelligence. Now it's really, as some of you were saying, it's really growing in the pharmaceutical industry. It was clinical trials. Again, that's 15 years, and now these huge figures like $6 billion. And artificial intelligence, I know that companies are using that quite extensively to ease and to make it not that costly, the clinical trials. So it's really important that it will be developed, no doubts.
You had a question?
Yes, I had a question. I don't know, maybe you talk after this, I asked this, but it's a quite interesting question. Just for other jurisdiction. I know this for Russia, I'm from Russia, Servizuko. What we found in Russia, that quite often big companies patent market claim. And they, according to regulation, they provide data how to get one of the options from this market formula, but not for everything, not for all the molecular which is possible to get out of this market formula. Then, in several cases which I handle, we cancel market formula because this company, the same company, published something similar before they file patent application. So then the market formula canceled. But then the owner, instead of market formula, he's making, he's changing his market formula to exact molecular. But what happened then? There is no description how to get the exact form of the exact molecular. How to get it, where it comes from. Just, I know that this molecular will cure some medicine, some illness. We have several cases in Russia about this, but for me it would be very interesting if there is the same problem in America and in India, if it's possible to answer. Maybe Taiwan also.
So I think it's pretty fact specific, but if I'm understanding you correctly, the applicant has limited the generic formula to a specific molecule.
Yes.
And that specific molecule, like head to toe, is it described in the application?
It's not described in the application.
It is not described. No. So if it is not described in the application...
But it was description for some other options under Marcus.
But it's been generically described, yes, but not specifically described. So in the U.S., that claim, there wouldn't be the support needed for that claim. So if the applicant wanted to get a claim that covered that specific molecule, they'd have to do it generically and carve around the prior art. Compared to other jurisdictions in the U.S., you have some fair amount of leeway to do things like negative provisos where you say, it is this, but it is not this. We don't necessarily need explicit support for some of those. Again, very fact specific. I would venture, I'm not a European practitioner, but I would venture to say in Europe as well, that would just be outright added matter if they claimed a molecule that just nowhere existed specifically in the application. I suspect that would be a worldwide phenomenon, problematic phenomenon.
Yeah, I think it would be a similar consideration for India as well, especially because you do not have the support, the specific support for the specific compound that you are now claiming would be devoid of support, both of course in terms of enablement requirements, but also in terms of just specific support. So it will be extremely complex. If not impossible, I would say it will be extremely complicated, difficult to challenging to prosecute this application in India as well.
And if they get a patent, I suspect, at least in the U.S., it would be susceptible to a validity challenge. But on the flip side, there might be actually some material there for a new application, as long as that particular molecule has some technical effect associated with it. That would be a nice, non-obvious argument to be pursued in a subsequent completely new application. I understand there's budgetary constraints.
New application impossible to file because usually the patent are challenged not in the beginning but in the very end of the patent, the validity, and that is why to file a new application for the molecule which is not on the market for some time.
Okay, so it's a bar to patentability.
But interesting thing that's I'm very, very good to hear that it's not only in Russia, it's the same problem.
I think you were asking for some closing remarks. All I would say is you've heard from a sampling of jurisdictions, but as you draft patent applications and represent your clients, write applications for the global stage. So I sit in the U.S., I represent a lot of life sciences companies. Diagnostics are prohibited under case law. But my claim 1 for a diagnostics type invention is still a diagnostics claim that I know will not be patentable in the U.S., but will be patentable in other jurisdictions. So I leave you with continue to educate yourself on the global stage and write patents for the global stage. You never know where your company is going to go and where they're going to need to commercialize and exclude others.
And what the law changes in the U.S. may end up being in the time frame of a patent application, which could be years and years. It's possible the law changes and it would be patentable in the U.S. My final words would be, in this world of artificial intelligence and biotech, is I work with scientists, chemists, molecular biologists, and also software engineers. They're very different people. And by that I mean you should make sure for your clients that are being in this new world of AI and biotech, the software engineers don't usually think they've made an invention. They're just writing software and building things and writing. Molecular biologists, chemists that are running assays and discovering drugs, they're pretty good about bringing that up, filing an invention disclosure form at their company, telling their managers what they've discovered. They're pretty good. Computer scientists are not. And so when you're talking to your clients and they're doing this AI analysis, make sure you talk to them about making sure they're bringing out the inventions they're discovering. They're probably not. They're probably not evaluating a lot of inventions in software that are coming up because their software engineers don't think they're inventive. They don't think they're inventions. They're just not thinking that way. So my parting words would be for your clients that are in pharma, make sure that they're evaluating their software AI inventions well enough to understand whether they should or shouldn't be filing patents on them. Because at least with my clients, they're realizing they're missing a lot of what they could otherwise be filing just because their software folks aren't as in tune to it as the chemists.
Thank you for our panelists. Regarding the gentleman's question, in Taiwan we have a little bit more sensitive political situation, so we are more broader and more kinder to grant a pardon, in particular for a foreign company. So if the model you just mentioned have been granted in your country, then you have higher opportunity to convince our examiner in Taiwan to grant you the pardon. But normally I would suggest my client you have to perform a little bit of extra experiment, generate some extra data, no matter through AI to laboratory, limiting the claim as small as possible, then you will get your patentability if getting the patent is your aim. But how to enforce this patent with the expected result, that will be another matter. So thank you very much for the audience and our esteemed colleagues. We have navigated through the intricate landscape patent, biotechnology, and pharmaceutical inventions because evidently the journey is full with jurisdiction-specific complexity, rigorous enablement requirements, and dynamic regulatory interference. So in the closing, it's essential we recognize while the role is career pattern in the biotech and pharmaceutical sector is undoubtedly challenging, but it's also immensely rewarding. So by staying abreast of evolving legal landscapes and embracing the technological advancement and fostering the cultural collaboration, we can continue to propel the field forward. So thank you for joining us for this journey through the complexity of patenting biotechnology and pharmaceutical. So together we can navigate these challenges and unlock the full potential of scientific information. So thank you very much. So I have to call upon the photographer to take a group photo for all of us. And thank you for all the audience. If you'd like to exchange the name card or ask further question, you are more than welcome. So now I'm going to fetch the photographer.